I'm Sarah Farley from Free State Electric Cooperative in McClough, Kansas. Welcome to Along Those Lines.
This episode is sponsored by ITG Communications. Committed to empowering America's electric cooperatives, they bring their telecom expertise to rural areas, transforming existing infrastructure into vibrant, connected communities.
Hi, everyone. This is a podcast about electric cooperatives, the work they do, and the challenges they face. I'm Molly Christian, guest hosting for Scott Hoffman. For this podcast, we'll be looking at some of the many examples of co-op innovation backed by historic new federal funding. Cooperatives have always been leaders on energy innovation, but a surge in public funding is helping co-ops take that innovation to the next level. The Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 contained nearly $10 billion for the Empowering Rural America or NRECA program, an initiative to support clean energy and efficiency projects in rural areas. The Agriculture Department, which oversees that program, recently made its first official New Era award to Dairyland Power Cooperative by Wind and Solar Power. The Inflation Reduction Act also created the $1 billion Powering Affordable Clean Energy program, known as PACE, which provides low-interest loans for projects that reduce emissions. These two programs represent the largest single investment in rural electrification since the New Deal. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law of 2021 also funded a range of programs that benefit co-ops, including the Department of Energy's GRIP program to enhance grid flexibility and reliability. Today we'll talk to representatives from NRECA and two co-ops that are leveraging these investments for advanced energy and grid projects. Joining us first on the podcast is Lauren Khair, Senior Director of Energy Research and Resilience with NRECA's Business and Technology Strategies Division. And later we'll talk to Travis Million, President and CEO of Golden Valley Electric Association in Alaska, and Jason Williams, Assistant General Manager for Engineering, Operations, and Power at Flathead Electric Cooperative in Montana.
Thanks for joining the podcast, Lauren. NRECA has helped its co-op members apply for and win some of this unprecedented federal funding. Can you remind us what some of the big programs are and what they're designed to do and what they can do for co-ops?
Thanks for having me, Molly. So there's three main programs that our cooperatives normally care about. The first one is the one that's closest to my heart because it's the first one we won. It's called the Grid Resilience and Innovative Partnerships Program, or GRIP for short. It is run by the Grid Deployment Office within the Department of Energy. The idea is to enhance your grid with smart grids and data like DERMS, distribution automation, or it's to increase the resiliency of your grid yourself, so undergrounding the power lines, putting batteries at the end of radial lines. So that's the one that our co-ops really care about. That's the one that was our first one within NRECA research, where we won $100 million for wildfire mitigation with Holy Cross Energy. The next one that's important to us is, and these are all of our Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act programs. The New Era and PACE programs run by USDA are a little bit different, so I'll stick with the DOE programs. The next one we're going to talk about here is the Energy Improvements in Rural or Remote Areas, or ERA for short. The DOE ERA program was actually made for our members. It helps the benefits to be flowing to communities of less than 10,000 folks. And the program is pretty broad. You can do energy efficiency, you can do grid upgrades, you can apply for generation, you can do distribution automation. There's a whole host of things that you could do in there. You could do microgrids. We were successful in the first round of that as well with our microgrids program called MG Cared. So that's another great one for our co-ops as well. There will only be one more round of both GRIP and ERA. Those are coming out here shortly. The last program we'll talk about here, Molly, is the Rural and Municipal Utility Advanced Cybersecurity Grant and Technical Assistance Program. This one is all about cybersecurity. It is only open to co-ops and munis, small not-for-profits or small or medium-sized not-for-profits and public power. And the idea here is to increase your cybersecurity posture. So that one we're still waiting for the first announcements of that one, but that one will help our co-ops increase their cybersecurity posture.
That was a great rundown and gave us kind of the breadth of what some of these programs can do. In terms of innovative solutions, what technologies or types of projects have co-ops pursued funding for in these programs? What are some of the big ones that jump out both on the generation side and the grid side?
So there's a couple there. So what I really have loved about the Department of Energy, and I would argue the USDA, is that they meet the co-ops where they are. So what's innovative for our co-ops may not be innovative for large IOUs, investor-owned utilities, that are great for our co-ops. So some innovative things that they have awarded. I'm really excited to hear about this restarting of the nuclear power plant that we're working on. We think it's Wolverine. They're working on starting up the nuclear power plant. I think that's a super innovative. I've never heard of a nuclear power plant being restarted. A lot of our co-ops in New Era, from what I understand, have won a lot of solar plus storage, putting a lot of solar plus storage projects into place. And then when it comes to the grid, a lot of it comes to distribution automation or advanced reclosers. With this wildfire grant, the idea was, how do we have non-expulsion fuses, aka something happens, those fuses don't let out a spark that could start a wildfire. So what's innovative for our co-ops is distribution automation, poles and wires. How do we overhead to underground? How do we get rid of those copper lines? How do we replace our poles with maybe better, stronger utility grade poles? And so innovation means a lot of things to our co-ops.
Yeah, and those are some great projects. And like you said, they address a whole kind of suite of challenges and provide a whole range of advantages to co-ops. How has NRECA supported its co-op members in accessing this money? What role have we played here in kind of helping our members get in touch with these programs?
Molly, that's a really important question. Early on into this process, so as we all know, the bipartisan infrastructure law was passed in 2021. And early on, the management and senior leadership of NRECA put a large emphasis and resources behind our infrastructure initiative. So we've done I would put them in categories of 4 groupings. First thing is, we've created a guidebook. Most co-ops, their bread and butter is to keep the lights on, not to write a mini research paper. So we developed a guidebook to help them demystify federal funding. It's mostly acronyms. I apologize in advance, but it will help with some of the vocabulary. We've also paired that recently with a new community benefits guidebook that helps our co-ops think about how to write community benefits plans for all of their grants. Second thing we've done is we've created a grant writer portal. So a lot of our co-ops don't know where to find a good grant writer, so we will matchmake them with a grant writer. We will also matchmake them with a community benefits writer. And when they win, we will help them actually connect with a consultant that can help them manage those grants. So we have an entire portal that can help our co-ops think about who they can use as resources to help them manage or apply for these grants. Third thing we've done is we've created these consortiums or consortia around different topics within the bipartisan infrastructure law. They're mostly education opportunity about what is a microgrid? Who's going to fund a microgrid? What would you fund under a microgrid? And then the last thing that I think is the most important one is, where does the money come from? Is we've formed these consortium applications. So NRECA has put in quite a few consortium applications on behalf of our membership. We won $155 million so far on behalf of our membership and counting, hopefully. And so that's a big benefit, is that NRECA Research will write the grant for them. We'll help them with all the pieces of paper. And then when we win, we will help project manage the grant for them so they can focus on what's important to them, which is their project and keeping the lights on.
That's great. That's a huge service and a benefit we can offer to members taking advantage of this raft of programs. And you went over what's already been approved or gone out the door, committed from the federal government. What are some of the other programs that still have pots of money available or that can still be tapped by co-ops?
Yeah, this is the most important part of this conversation, Molly, I think. We are winding down the bipartisan infrastructure law. The funding is starting to be given out, and they're starting to not run out of money, but be done with the money. Most people thought that each program would have 3 rounds. The Grid, Resilience, and Innovative Partnerships, for what we understand, is going to have 3 rounds. But some of them are going to have 2 rounds. And so there is another round of GRIP. We expect that to come out later this year, think late fall, early winter. There's going to be one more round of ERA, it seems like. They've already released a notice of intent in August. So they will be giving out the rest of the $1 billion. I think they have about $500 million left. That will be coming out here, I would assume, in the next week or 3 or so. The RMUC program, the cybersecurity program, that's run by our friends at Caesar within the Department of Energy. That one, I'm less sure about. It could be 2 rounds. It could be 1 round. There is still some significant amount of money there, so we'll stay tuned on that one. But for the most part, cooperatives should assume that there's probably 1 or 2 more rounds of these programs generally. And it's really important to keep that in mind. I will tell you to visit our infrastructure hub. We have all the programs listed and the amount of money that's left, that we assume is left, and the number of rounds that we assume is left. And that stays pretty up to date.
So it seems like something where the sooner you act, the better. Any other closing points you want to make on either the programs or what you think co-ops should do to take advantage of them, or what NRECA can do to help? Any kind of closing points you want to make?
I know everyone says it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I would agree with that statement. It's been so, I want to say, beautiful to watch our cooperatives go through this process, to win money both with us and on their own. There is still a little bit more winning to be done here, I would argue. But I just look forward to all of these projects and all of this innovation that's going to come to rural America. I'm just really excited to see what all of this hard work by our membership is going to lead to. And that's what makes me really excited, is like, this is just the beginning of a really great process and adventure, if you will. And so I'm really looking forward to these projects coming into operation and helping the communities that they serve, providing them, more reliable, more resilient, more affordable power.
And would you say you think this money has helped kind of accelerate or move up the timeline for projects? Do you think co-ops were going to kind of do some of this anyway, or do you see this as being sort of a catalyst for change?
I think it's both, Molly. That's a really great question. I think it's both. I think some of these projects would never have happened. Some of the wildfire projects, they're literally overhead and undergrounding on the side of a mountain. I'm not really sure that those would economically pencil out. So I think that a lot of projects that were on the back burner are being moved forward. And I also think that this is giving the co-ops an opportunity to think outside the box and to think about interesting innovations, interesting partnerships, interesting business models that they want to implement. Because I think that the world is their oyster and they're taking advantage of it. And so I think it's both. I think it's both moving things faster and making things that probably wouldn't have happened happen.
Excellent to hear. Lauren, thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll probably talk to you on another podcast soon. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me, Molly.
Let's pause here for a word from our sponsor, and when we come back, we'll talk to Travis Million at Golden Valley, whose Alaska co-op is tapping federal funding for an array of projects.
Support for this podcast comes from ITG Communications, a leading provider of telecom solutions. With extensive experience in rural areas, they collaborate with America's electric cooperatives to enhance existing infrastructures, enabling every cooperative to deliver cutting-edge telecom services to their communities. For any questions, do not hesitate to call them at 615-308-0191.
I'm Andrew Sparata from McKinsey Electric Cooperative in Watford City, North Dakota. You're listening to Along Those Lines.
Travis, welcome to the podcast, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Molly.
Golden Valley has been picked for hundreds of millions of dollars in funding through New Era, PACE, GRIP, and other programs. The awards are going to cover everything from battery storage and solar energy projects to transmission upgrades. Tell us about some of the biggest projects you're undertaking here.
I would say the biggest one that we're undertaking right now is actually a statewide project, and that's part of the GRIP funding. Alaska being unique in the lower 48, our grid infrastructure is nothing more than a 700-mile long, as we call, extension cord. It's a radial point-to-point transmission line from the southern part of the grid in Homer, Alaska, goes north into Anchorage, up into Palmer and Wasilla, and then eventually ends up here in Fairbanks, Alaska. So essentially, there's many points of that transmission system or the grid that is a single point of failure, one transmission line. So the GRIP funding will allow us to build a redundant transmission line. The first part that we were awarded will go from the southern part of the system within the Kenai Peninsula, which is in Homer Electric service territory, utilizing high voltage DC submarine cable through the Cook Inlet and then up into Anchorage. So gives a redundant path to get the energy off of the Kenai Peninsula up into the Anchorage Bowl. Obviously, the second step we would need to be working on still, that we're evaluating how we're going to get the funding to complete it, is to finish the line from Anchorage up to Healy, which would truly give redundancy the entire length of our grid.
That's excellent. And like you said, much of this funding was for grid projects, including to make the transmission system more resilient. Could you also give us a little bit of a summary of some of the kind of energy and storage projects that you're getting money for?
With both PACE and New Era, there's energy and storage involved with both of those. So on the PACE program, which we were awarded about a month ago, is $100 million in order to put in a new battery energy storage system. We're looking at a 46 megawatt, 2-hour lithium ion battery. With that would allow us to bring on some additional renewable energy systems. So we're looking at a PPA for 16 megawatts of solar generation within our service territory, combined with the battery would allow us to integrate those renewables into the system. Again, with Alaska being unique, we up here, we're pretty much all generation, transmission, and distribution co-ops. So with that, we don't have an infinite grid to where you can just put on a wind resource or a solar resource and plugs and plays fine, and we've got hydro to back it up or things like that. We've got to regulate that with our primarily either natural gas or fossil fuel burning generation sources. So the battery energy storage will allow us to use that for the regulation as opposed to our more expensive diesel sources. New era, same type of thing, but we're looking at another battery energy storage with potentially up to north of 100 megawatts of wind put on the system. And then in addition to that, adding additional transmission line within the Golden Valley service territory. And that transmission line does a number of things. It adds redundancy, adds more reliability and resiliency. But that transmission line opens up our network and our system to allow more of these renewable systems to come online and our system to remain stable.
A lot of these projects seem to address Alaska-specific energy challenges, but do you see some of these projects as being kind of a model for other co-ops in other states and areas? Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
I think a lot of them do. You hear it talked about all the time, microgrids, and how a lot of utilities are looking at, how they can develop and bring microgrids into their existing system. Well, Alaska is microgrids. Like every utility we have up here is its own microgrid. So advancing and utilizing some of these technologies and testing out how you'd integrate batteries and either wind or solar within a microgrid is, I think, a good starting point to help educate and figure out how to do so in a bigger system.
And how vital is this funding to the timing and just the development of these projects in general? Would you have done them anyway, but at a higher cost? Or, how important are these federal programs to carrying out these projects?
The funding mechanisms definitely open the door to allow us to do these projects. Some of the projects we probably were going to do anyhow, and it was going to just take us a longer period of time, definitely cost our membership a lot more money. So this does benefit our members in a large way from the standpoint that these are going to be federally funded or mostly federally funded and less of those funds coming out of the membership's pocket. So there's a handful we were going to be doing anyhow, specifically with grid resiliency that we already had budgeted in, and we were going to be doing these projects over, say, a 5 to 10 year period of time. Now we've got some of the federal funding to where we can accelerate that and get those projects taken care of much faster and at a lower cost for our members.
It sounds like a win-win to me. Do you kind of have an estimate of how long it'll take to do all these projects, the transmission and the other storage and solar projects?
A lot of these grant programs or funding mechanisms have timelines that we have to complete them in. For example, the New Era program that we're working into, everything has to be more or less completed by September of 2031. So there are some strict timelines on, especially if you're doing permitting and construction of large transmission or big wind projects with PPA agreements with the independent power producers doing that work. It's going to be an accelerated construction time frame, especially with the number of grants we have. We're going to be quite busy over the next 5 to 8 years, but most of these we have the timelines already set to get done well within the time frame that we're allotted.
Great. So a lot of positive change on the horizon. Any advice for co-ops who might be interested in pursuing what's left of some of these programs? A lot of them, I think, are close to fully subscribed and the windows are closed. But what would you say to a co-op pursuing some of the funding from these programs?
One of the lessons learned we had is make sure to be extremely thorough and provide as much information as you possibly can in your application. We found that even though we thought we did a very thorough job, there was always questions that came back. And after the fact, you take a look and go, oh, we could have included that in our initial application as well. So be ready to spend a lot of time and energy to put together your applications and just be ready for follow-up questions. And anytime you're working with the federal government, don't expect it to move extremely fast. But I do have to say, for what USDA has done and RUS to stand up these programs from basically the ground up in order to start getting these things rolled out, they did it in an amazing, fast amount of time because there was a lot of influx of requests that they had come in. And it's impressive to see how fast they were able to stand up a new program and get them turned around.
Anything else you want to highlight about these projects or the awards or any kind of final pieces of advice here?
I would just say for Golden Valley, we're over the moon excited for these opportunities. This really hits home with our co-op model, which is similar to so many others that we're trying to do everything we can to provide the safest, most economical, and reliable energy to our membership. And every one of these programs enhances all three of those. So being able to increase our reliability and either stabilize or reduce the cost to our membership is huge, especially up here in interior Alaska.
Well, best of luck on these projects, Travis. Thanks for joining us and sharing how these programs can support co-op innovation.
Thank you, Molly.
Finally, we'll hear from Jason Williams with Flathead Electric Cooperative in Montana, which is also pursuing a range of innovative projects with help from both the DOE and USDA. Thanks for joining us, Jason.
Thank you, Molly.
Co-ops are increasingly turning to energy storage to improve flexibility and reliability on their systems. Flathead was picked to receive 2 awards under separate DOE programs to support energy storage. I'd love to hear a little bit about each of those projects.
Sure, yeah. Thanks for having me today. First off, we'd just like to really thank NRECA. Both of these projects were consortium projects that NRECA handled, and they did a lot of the heavy lifting for the grant applications and all of the nuts and bolts that went into actually doing the grants. Both projects are really exciting for us. The first one was a battery storage project for a remote area of our system we call Essex, and it's up by Glacier National Park. And we've been looking at it for a little while, trying to figure out a solution to help with our reliability in that area, because most of the members that we serve up there are at the end of a long radial line with a lot of trees in between them and our substation. So this project was a unique opportunity because we found that we could eliminate about 50% of the outages that people at the end of the line experience, and also at the same time eliminate about 98% of those outages for the 50% of our members. So we're putting in a 3 megawatt hour battery up there, and mostly it's for reliability, but it will serve a little bit for doing some peak shaving on the side. So that's a really good project. Our other one is it's a really unique story because we have an outlying service territory satellite, if you will, that's about 400 miles away from our main corporate office. And the unique story with that is back in 1998, we purchased investor-owned holdings in Montana. And we just happened, that was one little sliver of members that we inherited. There's about 370 people that live in what we call our Cook City area. And it's down by Yellowstone National Park, right on the border of Montana and Wyoming. And it's another setup where all of our members are at the end of a about 30-mile radial line that's fed out of Cody, Wyoming. And so we looked at it and said, well, maybe we can do the same thing here with those members, because it's a lot of trees, a lot of vegetation, and in the wintertime, they get a ton of snow. And so it's a place where a lot of people go to snowmobile. So when we started looking at that area, we found that we could eliminate about 90% of the outages that those people experience on a yearly basis. So that one's going to be slightly bigger. It's about 3 megawatt or a 4 megawatt hour battery. And that's going to hopefully do a lot of reliability for us. Its primary function will be reliability. We're not planning on using it to do any peak shaving. That grant also has money in it for us to go down and upgrade all of our legacy meters down there. So kind of bring them to the 21st century and get those people so that we can do remote disconnects and ping our meters and do all that kind of good stuff that we have the ability to do with some little bit better technology. And then at the same time, we're going to do some vegetation management on that grant. So multifacets to it, but the main focus, I would say, is our reliability and really saving some member outage minutes.
Sounds like some great benefits for local communities and, of course, tourists to these beautiful areas. Do you know when you're going to get final approval on these grants?
So the first grant, the Essex grant, we just signed the paperwork, the contracts this week, and so we're basically official on it. The Cook City grant, we're expecting, that one's about a month behind. So probably sometime in October or maybe early November, we're hoping to have final approval on that one.
Good. So these dates are coming up fast. You also are about to start construction, I believe, on an energy storage system paired with community solar. This is the one you got a USDA Rural Energy for America grant program for. Is that the same as the other two?
No, this is a completely separate project. We have one of the communities that we serve on the north side of our service territory is a community of, the name of the town is Whitefish. And they were very interested in partnering with us. They have some land available by their water treatment plant, and they wanted to essentially donate the land and put in the community solar project. But they wanted to partner with us since we're the local utility and we can do the billing and all the crediting and stuff and sell the panels. We went ahead and partnered with them. So they provided the land, and then we did all of the community outreach to sell the panels. And then the grant is really to offset some of those costs. And then we're also doing some panels for low-income families. And then the battery storage part of it is going to be really for peak shaving.
Great. So even more benefits for these storage projects. And you've touched on some of the benefits, but can you say generally why the energy storage technology will strengthen your system and improve service for your members?
So a lot of the areas where these batteries are at least for the first two projects, there's a lot of lower income type families, underserved areas of the system and that. So it's going to really provide a reliability benefit for those folks. And, if you're familiar with Montana at all, you know that we can have some pretty cold winters, if you will. This past January, we had temperatures for minus 35 degrees for 5 days straight.
Wow.
So reliability is a fairly significant lift for us and something that's extremely important and something we're always looking for better ways to provide that reliability. And when you're talking about serving load at the end of radial lines, it becomes increasingly challenging because you don't have the ability to switch loads over to different lines if you have damage and that kind of stuff. So finding solutions that really work in those types of situations is critical.
No, it really is. And looking at other kinds of solutions where you've won some recent funding, you also have received grants or gotten final approval for grants for wildfire prevention and to research using distributed energy on your system. Can you tell us a bit about these efforts?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we, being in a remote area of Montana, we have a lot of trees in our area. So vegetation management is extremely important. We have about 1,600 miles of vegetated lines in our areas that we're, continuously maintaining. And the majority of our outages are really a result of trees. And so pairing right-of-way and vegetation management in these grants just allows us to more effectively get in, trim our right-of-way. We're also working on creating what we call a danger tree program, which I think a lot of utilities have, where you're looking outside of the right-of-ways to clear those trees that could potentially fall from outside and cause the outages. So when we're talking about reliability for us, tree trimming and right-of-way vegetation management is a critical aspect of that reliability. So again, we like to partner with our communities. So just like our first two grants, we did a community wildfire defense grant, and we partnered with our local economic development agency on that grant so that we're getting the total grant's about $10 million, and we're getting $7 million of that, and they're getting $3 million of that. And so for our part, we'll be doing right-of-way clearing, vegetation management on our lines. But for their part, they're going to be able to use that money to partner with actual members to do wildfire defense on their private properties. So it's really a win-win for us to get our right-of-way cleared, and then for our members to actually be able to do wildfire defense on their private properties as well. So that's a great one. Our other one is called Cider Grant, and there were, I think, 5 utilities in the nation that got picked for this grant. And it's really to study how we can use DERMS platforms to do peak shaving. And so we're on the end of the line for our power provider, Bonneville Power. We're at the end of their system, so we're basically radial fed, just like some of our members are radial fed. And like a lot of utilities these days, we're facing constraints with transmission. And so that grant, we're really looking for ways, how can we mitigate some of our transmission capacity needs by controlling some of our loads and peak shaving.
It's a really cool set of solutions, both on the grid side and the energy side. And on a co-op specific question, why are co-ops good stewards of federal dollars for these types of projects?
I think it's really because of our business plan. Co-ops are community-based. We are member owned. Really, every focus that we have in my mind is about our membership in our communities. And I think that makes us, we're not beholden to shareholders, we're beholden to our members. And we're really looking out for their best interests and how we're going to most reliably, cost effectively serve their needs. And people are becoming more and more reliant on electricity. Everybody's got way more devices in their houses. You've got electric mowers and weed eaters and all of these kinds of electrified pieces of equipment. So it's just becoming more and more critical for our infrastructure to serve our members' needs. And so I think we're uniquely positioned to be able to do that because we are member owned and we are looking out for our members.
More great examples of co-op ingenuity in action. And yeah, good luck on these projects, Jason. We look forward to staying in touch as they move ahead. And hopefully we can get out to see some of this technology go live when you're done.
Thank you. We're excited to get started with them. And next year is going to be a really busy year. We're going to be in the implementation phases of several of these grants. So next year is going to be a fun, interesting year to get some of these projects moving and see some results.
Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Molly.
And thanks to you, our listeners, and our sponsor, ITG Communications. For more on this and other podcasts, visit us at electric.coop. Until next time, for Along Those Lines, I'm Molly Christian.
I'm Amy Howlett from Ohio's Electric Cooperatives in Columbus, Ohio. Thanks for listening to Along Those Lines. Subscribe and rate us on your favorite podcast app.